goals of SDGs have to be met with CBDR, of course. The main difference between MDGs and SDGs is that these SDGs are in a way negotiated. MDGs were not the result of any intergovernmental discussions. So to that extent, I think countries are on board having full knowledge of what it involves. And I'm sure that the progress on the SDG front is going to be much better, and education is going to play a very major role in that. So from Mahesh to, let's move on to Adriana from Venezuela, and listen to her on what the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change mentions about education, and what is the role that is envisaged for education in the convention and obviously now in the agreement. So over to you, Adriana.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It is an honor for me to be participating in this international conference and to be for the first time in India, an extraordinary country, the country of Gandhi that has inspired the world. And one of the key messages that Gandhi said is that every person should be the change that they want to see in the world. And here is an honor to be with many change makers that are leading by example. Also, I would like to thank the Center for Environmental Education and its director, Kajiteya, for his leadership, but as well for all the team that has been working for many months to put together this conference. Thanks a lot for this effort, and thanks a lot for making this possible. I would like to share with you 3 key messages about what happened at COP21 in Paris and why it is an historical agreement. The second is how education has been included in the climate change agreement, but as well how the climate change process is within the UNFCCC, the Climate Change Convention. And third, some good practices, some key actions and recommendations about the process. What happened at COP21 and why the people say that it is an historical agreement? In December, in Paris, 159 nations adopted the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. It has been the first time that over 100 heads of the states and governments were together at the same time, in the same place, showcasing the highest political commitment on climate change. The Paris Agreement is a universal agreement that establishes commitments for all parties. The main objective of this climate agreement is to keep the global temperature rise this century below the 2 degrees Celsius, and also to try effort to limit the temperature increase even further 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels. There are some key points that are essential for this Paris Agreement. Regarding mitigation, all countries have commitments to reduce their emissions to achieve the goal of the temperature goal. Also, adaptation. Adaptation has been a strength in this agreement, and the idea is to give support to developing countries to build resilience and to adapt to the effects of the climate change. 3 key enablers are also part of the agreement: finance, technology, and capacity building to enhance climate change action by all countries. The basis for this climate agreement were the intended national determined contributions. What are these? Are the action plans that each country defined with their commitments on climate change. In Paris, when the governments got together, 188 countries have submitted their intended national determinate contributions, and it makes a really change in the approach because it is a bottom-up approach to build this international agreement. Parties agree in Paris that they will submit the national determinate contributions every 5 years, and that in 2023 will be an stock take to assess the progress in the implementation. Also, another key element of the climate agreement is that it recognizes the key role that the non-party stakeholders play in the implementation. It means civil society, the private sector, financial institutions, citizens, cities, and also other subnational authorities. Following the adoption of the Paris Agreement in New York on the 22nd of April, that is the Earth Day, there will be a special event where for the signature. This agreement will be open for a signature for 1 year, and it will enter into force once at least 55 parties, 55 countries that represent at least the 55% of the global emissions have ratified the agreement. The Paris Agreement is a long-term vision for a low-emission, green and climate-resilient development. And how education has been integrated into the climate change agreement. First of all, you may know that Article 6 of the Convention is the article that invites all parties to promote education, training, public awareness, public access to information, public participation, and international cooperation. Parties have recognized that for effective implementation of the adaptation and mitigation actions, education plays a fundamental role. In 2012, at the COP in Doha, parties agreed the Doha Work Program on Article 6 of the Convention. It is an 8-year program that sets up and brings the general actions that country, but also other stakeholders can implement in these 6 elements of Article 6. During the COP21 in Paris, for the first time ever in the history of the COP, was organized an Education Day on the 4th of December. And this Education Day recognized the key role that education plays in all the process. It started with a ministerial event where ministers of education, but also ministers of environment work together. It is one of the key messages. We need to enhance the cooperation and the articulation between the environmental sector, but as well the education sector. And climate change is not an environmental issue anymore. It is a development issue, and therefore it's a cross-sectoral issue that requires the work of all different stakeholders together. Also, at the COP was organized a side event on formal climate change education, discussing how countries have integrated climate change education into their curriculum, different programs to train teachers, how have developed teaching materials and other programs. And as well, a side event on non-formal climate change education, exploring innovative ways for climate change learning, for instance, music, social media, art, how we can best communicate and how we can mobilize action. In Paris, we can say that education has been recognized and has been elevated to the highest political agenda. Why? The climate change agreement in the preamble recognized the key role of education, but as well that the sustainable lifestyle and the sustainable pattern of consumption and production play an important role in addressing climate change. Also, the climate change agreement has a dedicated article. It is Article 12 that says, parties shall cooperate in taking measures as appropriate to enhance climate change education, training, public awareness, public participation, and public access to information, recognizing the importance of this step with respect to enhance actions under this agreement. Also, the Paris Agreement has a decision that contains 2 paragraphs related to education and invites the first conference of the Paris Agreement, it means at COP22 in Morocco, to explore ways to enhance the implementation of Article 6 of the Convention. The third point that I wanted to share with you is why this conference is so relevant and how your recommendations will fit all the process. First of all, under the Doha World Program, there are several recommendations that parties can undertake. For instance, to promote education, formal, no formal, and informal, include climate change education into the curriculum, develop a national strategy with a long-term goal to promote climate change education. Also, develop different public awareness materials and enhance the cooperation between the government and civil society and different partners. There are several good practices, just starting for where we are, the Center for Environmental Education, as Kayiteya mentioned, the train is one of these good practices that we hope also to showcase at the Climate Change Conference and other international meetings. In Indonesia, Benin and Uganda, they developed a national strategy addressing the 6 elements of Article 6. Dominican Republic mobilized from the national budget more than $1 million for training teachers on climate change education. Mexico included into their national climate change law one chapter dedicated to climate change education. Malawi developed training material for teachers in cooperation with teachers. And also we have been working with the CEE in the compilation of good practices that will be highlighted in the UNFCCC process. Some of the recommendations, just to finalize my intervention, is that there are so key questions that during the conference you can discuss. For instance, what strategies are effective to change attitude and behaviors towards sustainable development? What is needed to advance from public awareness to action? And what good practices we can identify that could be replicated? Just to finalize, I would like to highlight that the results of this conference we would like to showcase at the COP22 in Morocco during the Education Day. Also, as we are in the review of the Doha World Program, 2016 is a key year where different ideas and recommendations to move the agenda forward could be included and where parties will discuss in May and as well at the COP. And the government of India, with this commitment, also can bring your recommendations to the table. And the results of the COP and all these recommendations and the review of the Doha World Program also will feed the process of the GAP. Then it is working together to make possible that all our efforts are contributing to the same goal. And with this also is an invitation to continue working and with your work and your effort to support implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, but as well the Climate Change Agreement. Thank you.
6 of the Framework Convention further, and the Doha Work Program is going to be kind of discussed in the next COP. And I hope that each country, including India, will have significant things to say, and our CE, of course, will prepare the material for that. Let us now come to Mr. Prasad Menon, Chairman of Tata Projects Limited. He's going to speak to us on industry and education and how that impinges on the SDGs.
Thank you, Chairman. My distinguished colleagues on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, I'm acutely aware that I'm probably one of the very few representatives of business and industry in this forum, and you will be excused if you look upon me with great suspicion. It was very interesting this morning when I was listening to some of the speeches during the inauguration, that while everybody talked about the need for partnerships between government, NGOs, institutions, and academia, hardly anybody spoke about industry. And I would like to commend to you that industry has to be embraced in this entire journey, because industry has a lot to give in terms of actually getting contacts with people, with the impact that they have and the influence that they have. And I would strongly urge that that kind of a partnership actually comes into being. I would like to just talk to you about 3 examples of which I am familiar in the companies that I worked in, where we actually got together the projects that we did in CSR and incorporated education within that. They're small examples, and they're not those that can be used for large numbers, but it is a very good example. The first one I'd like to talk about is something we did in Gujarat. About 15 years ago, the whale shark, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, which is the largest fish in the world, was a threatened species. And the whale shark would come up the coast of Gujarat for breeding. And they were being killed in large numbers by the fishermen on the coastline, just to take the oil out of their livers. And where was that oil being used? In boats for waterproofing. And later on, when fishing itself became difficult, they were starting to sell the meat. Well, we started a program in partnership with the fishermen, with the community, with the Coast Guard, with the Environmental Department of Gujarat, and with the government of Gujarat, and put together a program to educate them and stop this slaughter. But it really actually got traction when we finally got the help of somebody who's very familiar to many of you in Gujarat, the spiritual leader Morari Bapu. He came on board, and he actually invoked this entire concept that the Honorable Governor talked about of the household, the integrated household, and how which household would deny a daughter into the house when she was going to have a baby. And that's exactly what was happening with the whale shark. It was coming here to have its babies. And it actually struck a tremendous chord. And within 3 years, the slaughter stopped. And today, the whale shark is swimming freely off the coast of Gujarat, which is an enormous accomplishment, but it happened because of this partnership. And in the process of that partnership, not only did the employees of Tata Chemicals who were involved in it learn, but the fishermen learned. I dare say the members of the Coast Guard and government officials learned. So it was a wonderful win-win kind of a situation. The second example that I'd like to talk about is in energy. The other company that I was involved with is Tata Power. When we started looking at sustainability being incorporated into our strategy, we started talking about how do we educate and who do we educate. And of course, very quickly we came to the conclusion that we needed to talk to children. So we picked the age group of 10 to 16, started in Mumbai, and started with the affluent schools because we knew that that was where the greatest consumption was going on. We talked to them and taught them about energy conservation, about sustainability and carbon footprints. And 6-7 years later, we covered more than 1 million children in the country. And I know in between that it was succeeding because a friend of mine rang me up one day and said, "What on earth are you doing? You know, I've got huge problems in my house. My daughter refuses to allow me to travel alone in a car. And my daughter says all air conditioners have to be set at 25 degrees and nobody will have a shower. They'll all have a multi bath." So I said, great, that's success. So that again happened not because of Tata Power. We didn't have all the knowledge. We didn't have the capability. But we worked with NGOs. We worked with principals of schools. We worked with the education department of the Maharashtra government. And it came about. The third thing, which was more at home, is that as a continuum of all this, we said that why can't our employees now talk about reducing their carbon footprint? So we actually asked everybody to calculate their monthly carbon footprint, declare it, and then actually set goals to say, how can we reduce this by 10%? I must confess here that the worst carbon footprint was mine. But there it was. It was all out in the open. And we were able to actually get employees to come up with suggestions on how to reduce this carbon footprint. All these examples are just to show you that a huge amount of education on sustainability, on biodiversity, can happen within industries and by the confluence of industry and civil society and government. And I do believe that industry has the capability of making change happen much faster than any other agency. And therefore, it is very necessary for us to be involved. So I'd just like to conclude by saying, please do include industry. Please embrace them. I think they're also wanting to embrace civil society. And together, I'm sure we can make a difference much, much faster. Thank you very much.
The importance of industry. You know, without industry, we cannot achieve the sustainability goals. You know, one of the reasons is part of the problem is industry. So solution also has to come from industry. So therefore, I think we all know that, you know, without industrialization, without the role of industry and industry employees and leaders, difficult to solve the problem of climate change and overall sustainability issues. So I hope that it is something which is not going to be imposed by government. It is going to be coming from within. And that's my sincere hope. And that's what we in the Ministry of Environment and Forest have been trying. We want the industry to come itself with solutions so that our command and control kind of mechanism and the regulations don't have to be brought in. And we are happy to say that Tata is a group which is quite aware. And we have many industrial people now who are fully on board. They played a very key role in our formulation of INDCs, and they were with us in Paris, and they are fully on board. So I want this message to go and to spread that Indian industry is fully on board when the issues of sustainability and climate change are discussed, and they are with government, with people. So that's, I think, essentially the message that we want to give. Let's now have a young man's perspective, the youth perspective from Varun Jhaveri on issues of education, SDGs and climate change. Yeah.
Good afternoon, dignitaries on and off the dais. I already feel very learned after hearing your talks with regard to the issue in hand of education in Sustainable Development Goals. Ladies and gentlemen, I am standing here and I am also representing 1.8 billion youth voices. The last decade for youth has been, I would say, very inspiring. We have traveled a great journey. From sitting there to speaking here, the journey that we have traveled in last 1 decade. So we'd like to first of all thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity to speak our opinion. Tracing back the journey of Sustainable Development Goals, when we formulated 17 Sustainable Development Goals with 169 targets, there was a huge difference which was followed in the SDG process and the MDG process. One of the crucial difference which was followed is that in the SDG process there were a lot of consultations which were hosted. Now when I say consultation, they were the consultation which included the citizens of the world. There was a My World survey, there was a World We Want survey, in which there were at least 6 million votes being casted with regards to what issues does the global citizens wants to see in the SDGs. And when the votes came in, the 80% of voting was done by the youth of this world. And education was voted as the top priority in terms of issue through the My World survey and the World We Want survey. The point here is that there is a huge similarity between education and youth. The similarity being that both of them are very cross-cutting theme in terms of their nature. They are applicable and they are very much important for the realization or for the achievement of every other goal. Also for the fact that they are a prerequisite for achievement of any other goal. Now when I say regarding the year 2015, I think that that's a very crucial year because that is the year when we actually planned. But I feel that 2016 is a more important year because that is the time when we actually think about how to execute our plan. We already have the what, now we need to move to how, and that is the most important part here. I feel that we need to concentrate on 3 P's in this particular year. The 3 P's being policy, partnership and participation. We need to have policies which drive the importance of education in achievement of sustainable development. Now when I say policy, it can be awareness by probably including new fundamentals like global citizenship education, education for sustainable development in our day-to-day curriculum. It can be hosting youth consultation to make sure that we are localizing the resources, we are trickling down the actual essence of SDGs to the common people. And when I say about accountability, I'm not only talking about the member nations accountability, I'm talking about something known as citizen accountability. Just like how we have values, let us make sure that now our values are driven by SDGs. We have a huge framework, but let us make sure that we simplify that framework and be very conscious through our values in our day-to-day life. With regard to partnerships, it's extremely vital that we foster partnerships between governments, between organizations and government, and between think tanks, NGOs, civil society and youth network. Because that is when the change actually happens, when you have proper partnerships in place, when you have proper stakeholders coming together and acting upon an issue. And the last P is regarding participation. The policy piece and the partnership piece will be extremely ineffective if there is no participation from our end. We need to make sure that we actively engage in this process, either by creating awareness and by making sure that we are accountable for what we are doing. Just narrowing down, coming to the country of India, having a population of 1.2 billion, I particularly feel that population is not our weakness because diversity is our strength. If you look at the ancient India, you will see that we have already been always practicing the concept of sustainable development. If you look at ancient India, there were knowledge about how to conserve forests. There was brilliant water management systems in place. It's just that we are reforming the old ideas and putting in the new framework to suit the modern needs of the modern man. But still we are doing the same. It's the same basic fundamentals. And now is the time when we actually put those fundamentals into practice. Going on, I particularly feel that we need to have a translation of sustainable development goal into local languages. We need to make sure that we have got linguistic online clearing houses which can have a repository of resources for localization. And finally, I feel that with regard to especially youth participation, that there is a lot of emphasis on increasing youth participation, but what I particularly feel is that there has to be an emphasis on authentic youth participation. The word authentic is very important here, and I would like to put a very strong emphasis on all the young minds and all the young participants here, that please make sure that we read and we learn from all the experts who have assembled here. And the most crucial piece here is that after we learn, after we assemble here, we go back and we follow up our learnings by taking actions. That is extremely crucial, because if we actually don't follow up, the entire purpose of such type of platforms get diluted. So I request all the young minds and all the young participants here to make sure that we read, we talk with the experts, and we do a proper follow-up mechanism. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Play an important role in formulating and implementing the national goals under the SDGs. Now that's a big challenge, and very soon this process is going to be taken up by all ministries when they take up this work within their own jurisdiction. I would request, as our young friend Varun was mentioning, that when they come up with their proposals on their websites or through workshops or whatever methodology they follow, please give your feedback, please give your considered views, please suggest to them how it's going to be more useful for you and how it's going to be more relevant for you as youth. So that's what will play a very major role when we develop our own goals and our own indicators. From youth, let's move on to women. And I think we can have no better proponent on this issue than Ila Ben, who is going to speak to us on education, women and livelihoods.
Friends and the panelists, first of all, let me thank CEE Kartike for inviting me to
laptop को band कीजिए please.
Use the laptop.
for inviting me to be here and allow me to share my ideas, which are not different, but maybe. Let me also first make clear that my worldview on all subjects is basically that of the poor, women, self-employed, and since education is the major theme, let me also in the beginning say one comment on education, and that is that those who lead the world today are challenged by one rather fundamental and global issue. There are fewer and fewer resources, and there is greater and greater competition to get access to them. Prevalent economic theory guiding corporate and national management says that healthy corporations and nations must keep growing their revenues and GDPs, and that within them individuals must keep earning more and more. This drive to produce more and consume more is driving us to fight over increasingly scarce resources. We are literally swallowing up our Mother Earth. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that brought us to these problems. Therefore, it is high time we question the value of economic and management models based on an inherently false and destructive concept, I may say. Having said that, I do consider that sustainable development goals now being identified and broadened and made more open for discussion, that this workshop, such workshops are the best steps towards a struggle, worthwhile one, to think ahead and for a peaceful, sustainable future. With this regard, I talk about education and women's work. Our view of education needs to be reviewed. Let us see education as a lifelong pursuit for both adults as well as children, and not limit to school years or end it with university degrees. 12 years of constant schooling is too difficult for those who need to grow up fast to begin contributing to the family finances. Our current education system must include trade schools that prepare children to enter the workforce with good usable skills besides literacy, good usable skills that leads to building the nation. Useful education must be relevant to daily life as well as to future life. It must both inspire and equip. Education must address the needs of both family and the globe. It must equip us to become aware of our role in the economy, as producers and as consumers, also of our role in society as peacemakers as well as agents of change, and also about our rights and duties as responsible global citizens. When we say education for life, what we call Nirantar Shiksha, it should bring to mind the knowledge we need to build a life that is creative, cooperative, and filled with happiness. Also, we need to recognize that adulthood is a prime time to learn new ideas, new skills, and pursue new knowledge. With the experience that comes from work and the wisdom that comes with age, adult minds are far more in need of new concepts and at some times to ignore the old ones, new technologies and new methods, and have a greater ability to test and put them to good or better use. Work and task specific innovation. Work-related, task-related specific innovations are more likely to result in economic benefits, and they would not just be confined to certain industries and university departments with the R&D, research and development capabilities, but spread all types of trades and all strata of society and at all local levels. In my experience, women are the key to building a community and maintaining it. When we invest in women's participation, we have an ally who wants a stable community and roots for her family, for her children. Each woman is a worker, of course, has productive work in her hands. True. But also, she is also a provider, a caretaker, an educator, a networker, and a vital forger of bonds in a community. Moreover, I have noted women's participation brings constructive, creative, and sustainable solutions to the community. I consider women's participation and representation an integral part of building stable, peaceful communities. If I mention about Seva's experience, So based on that, what we have found the most is, three major factors that play a key role to the lives of the villages. The need for cash, indebtedness, and need to build a better skill base. Despite growing vegetable and milk, they are not in a position to consume what they produce. Need for cash is greater than nutrition, their own primary needs. The spiral of debt is wrapped so tight around their lives. It subsumes all their hard-earned money that impedes their ability to own assets. Good harvest gets swallowed up into paying debts. There are few opportunities to upgrade their existing skills or new skills. Absolutely almost none. Therefore, steady flow source of cash, ownership, and better skills of many of the broken links of Anubandh in rural areas can be reconnected through SDGs. Secondly, community approach to solving rural problems like access to water, healthcare, banking, builds multilateral relationships within the community and with neighborhoods. It is possible to create such a world, and there are good pockets in our country who have made it possible to sustain their communities in at least basically in their basic primary needs of life, of survival. Thank you.
आपका बहुत धन्यवाद हीला बहन for your emphasis on निरंतर शिक्षा, the centrality of the role of women and how they can play a role in educating the future of a society, of a country. I hope that the messages that are emerging from here would get further discussed in other sessions and thereafter. May I now request Dr. Anantha Kumar Duryappa. I'm told that he is speaking on something very interesting. Why can't we achieve the SDGs? Is that the topic? All right. Okay. So let's hear him then. That's interesting.
So, I took a lot of inspiration from, as many of you are educators, from Paulo Freire in Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And I kind of suggest that, can we achieve the SDGs? And I've reflected on this many times. And when I went to give my annual lectures in University of Tokyo, one of the things that the students from the master's class sort of said, so you just finished the SDGs, so what do you think? And I said, I don't think you're going to be very successful. And they were a little bit shocked, sort of say, coming from somebody who's also working at the UN. The reason I say it on two counts. One is mindsets and attitudes, and Ashok Khosla actually identified mindset. I was really happy that. And if you think about mindsets and attitudes, if when you look at an example of charity in terms of poverty, SDG 1, the emphasis is always an approach of charity in terms of transfer, financial transfers. But Amartya Sen talks a lot more in terms of basic capabilities. And in a sense, it's actually the challenge of bringing in instrumental freedoms versus just a financial transfer. And you get all these philanthropists saying you're going to spend, Bill Gates and all that stuff. But it's not that. It's not a matter of transfer of financial. It's about basic capabilities and expansion of that. And that mindset has to be changed. And I can keep on going on and on. The two main things I was a bit was hoping that it would be on the SDGs is population control. Again, Koshla talked about that, and that's a major problem. And the second one is the arms race. You know, the amount of resources that we put into arms, it's incredible, and we don't have an SDG goal on an arms race. It would have been great if you had a simple constraint equation which says the expenditure on arms has to be less than or equal to the expenditure on education. Boom. And you get a major initiative. So the mindset is just a matter of just partial change. So I thought that was a problem. Then we have this whole notion of right and wrong. You know, it's either right or wrong. And we really can't, you know, we live in such a complex world, there is no right and wrong. It is a fuzzy world out there. And one of the things that we're always struggling is where we have not a single identity, but multiple identities. Do we teach this to the children of tomorrow? That it is okay to embrace multiple identities. I can be an academic with very liberal thoughts. I can be a Muslim. I can be, I play kendo, which is a Japanese swords play. I also have that as an identity. Multiple identities, and I'm comfortable with that. I do not want to be pegged into one. And that's something that we also are missing in some of the education systems. Then the economic rationality. The last speaker very eloquently talked about. I'm an economist, come from one of the strongest neoclassical trainings. And the whole notion of economic rationality has just taken root. And if you look at the SDGs, there are a lot of trade-offs among the SDGs. You need to spend money on achieving SDGs, and governments will then say we need to increase GDP, which means you need to use more resources, and then more pollution. And the law of physics say you just can't have no pollution. You have to have it because it's materials science, material physics. So there's a lot of ambiguities and a lot of dichotomies in this. And I am a bit disappointed that none of this actually came out in the whole discussion. Then it comes to the education. So, all right, we have some hope here because the education system can change that. But the problem with our education system, as Paulo Freire says, it's a banking system. It's a one-way transfer of knowledge. Here it is. This is what it is. And we also heard a little bit about values. Whose values? And this is a very dangerous ground. So one of the things that we do at the Institute is we don't start with values. We basically talk about competencies that then you provide an individual to make those values from a constructive dialogic process. And that's what that's what I think we should be pushing for. So these are the two things that I sort of say on two counts, but we have hope. So we talk about a transformative learning system. The representative from the youth talked about the 3 Ps. I call the C-cube model because I put it as cube because it's multiplicative. I don't want it to be linear. It's not just additive, it multiplies, each one of them multiplies. And the first one is consciousness raising. Can we develop the ability of individuals to pose questions? Challenge, challenge, challenge. One of the things that I found, which is now, he's now been pushed up on the pedestal in India, Swami Vivekananda, which I read some of his earlier stuff. He always says, when you want to find a guru, challenge him until you're exhausted, until you are then comfortable with the teachings. And that has to be ingrained in our education system, to pose questions, seek answers from multiple dimensions, and then take action. Not to just listen to, and especially now we have so much information overload. It's not a problem of assessing information, it's about analyzing information, questioning the information. You go to Wikipedia, you got some good pages, you got some which are really crap. And you have to be careful, but a lot of students just take it because it's Wikipedia. So consciousness raising. The other one is critical reflection, ability of individuals to understand different perspectives, made of beliefs, values, and assumptions. How do we change that? We don't want to be dogmatic. Just because I grew up in this particular type of household with this kind of do I have to have static value systems? We're living in a very fast, rapid changing world that needs our values to be constantly challenged, constantly evolving. And we don't see that in our systems. And then the last one is the convictional, the ability of individuals to want to learn and to make change and be part of that change. Yeah. The desire to learn, not just as to be productive, just to be part of an economic model, but to increase the notion of happiness, the notion of well-being. I kind of refrain from happiness because there's a whole problem with happiness. Depending on different perspectives of people, different things make me happy than things that make you happy. All right, so let's broaden up into well-being, and that's the main thing that we should be looking at. Are these in our education systems? So, some ideas on how to implement. So, I just don't want to come here and just create chaos and then walk away. That's the easy way out. One of the things that we think about is, rather than creating more curriculum on environment, more curriculum on now that the kid on the block is global citizenship, and then now it's coming in preventing extremism, violent extremism. It's about that there is a big emphasis on STEM. Let's accept the fact. Until we have this transitional change, every government is pushing on STEM. Now they call it STEAM, because they've added the arts into it as well. Instead of creating another curriculum for environmental science, environmental education, global citizenship, embed this whole notions into the core disciplines. The students have already up to their necks in curriculums. They have so much of stuff to cover. I have 3 kids going through now the Canadian education system, and I look at their course load and I said, oh my God, this is crazy. And then my son gets a B in Spanish and he can't say a single word in Spanish. My daughter just did sustainability science and she said that was the most boring class she's ever had. And she's doing architecture. There's something wrong here and we need to have a major change in that. I apologize to many of my colleagues who have spent years and decades on environmental education. This is a challenge in terms of how do we embed it. Now there's another thing where it's called Libre, learning through issue-based, because there's been a lot of call on the relevance of education. Why are we studying this? When I do differential equations, why on earth am I doing dy by dx? A lot of us who have gone through it, it becomes a mechanistic thing to do. You get an equation, you do dy, you do everything, do it perfectly. I have no clue why I'm doing this. So let's link it up, because it's an important and a brilliant concept, has a lot of stuff that we need to, so let's embed it. And then we got things like virtual reality and games. Kids love games. Let's use that. And I want to leave some take-home messages because I've got saying please end. You got the first one, new mindsets through transformative learning systems. Involvement of youth is critical in transformative. Not in the youth washing. I just published an op-ed in The Guardian about youth washing. Let's not do youth washing. Let's get them really inclusive in a transparent process, and the youth, not the affluent youth, the ones who are already into the system, but the ones who are in the peripherals, the ones who don't like to speak, the ones who have not that kind of skills to come up and speak, but they have very, very valid things to say on this platform. We have to reach that out. And again, I always say, let's not tell the values, let's not preach what those values are. Let them decide what those values are, and hopefully there is a consensus on what those values are. And learning should be fun. I always had one of the worst learning experiences in my life. I hope my kids will have a more enjoyable, which is not happening as well. I hope their kids at least will have an experience where learning would be a lot of fun, just as much fun as they play with games. Thank you very much.
Provoking intervention or in this series of interventions that we are making, and I hope that people get suitably inspired and they change the systems wherever they are, in whatever capacity they can, to make education more fun. We have 2 more speakers. We are running against time, but let's kind of hear them. We have Dr. Mohan Menon, is going to speak to us on open education and technology mediated learning. Thank you.
Towards the end of the other presentations, basically education, I come from education, probably it's the other side of, most people are from environmental concerns, we are very much in the core of concerns. I'm not, really. So maybe that is an advantage in a way. I had some slides to show, then I thought probably technology is the right thing, not the right thing to use here. So I'm closing this. So I will just present a few things which might be of, which might make sense to you, all of you. And there are, you know, when we talk about education, always education was seen as one of the goals. And of course it is again and again said that it is much broader, that it has to, it will impact all the 17 goals. We have been talking about it. We have been talking about lifelong education. We have been talking about that education is important. But how much we have done about it, I'm not very sure. If you look at the whole development of things in education sector itself, a lot of things have been happening in the last 50 years. Like for example, the open education as in the 60s, when the open universities came up and the impact of that and giving more access to students, more and more people can go and learn, adults can go and learn. And then in the 90s and even in this millennium, that we had what we call as the open educational resources. Now, I want to ask how many of your materials that you have in your institutions are open for others to use with an open license? Including CEE. I asked to Karthikey Bhai the other day and he was talking about one of the experiences. I think it is time that we have to be much more, the partner with others and let others use whatever we have made. We are not, after all, not made these materials for making money out of it. It is to make a difference in the people. And all those great experiences which has happened in pockets of different countries can be really make an impact in the entire world only if you start using some sort of technology. It cannot be only a localized affair. Localized, yes, we will be able to make an impact and can show that this happened in Gujarat or it happened in Malaysia or elsewhere. But then if that has to impact, that's what we really have to look at. And of course, there was a talk about MOOCs. It is a new bandwagon that everybody is jumping into. We also did that in our university. Basically, MOOC is one of the ways of doing it. But what we are really looking at is that today, children are, maybe it is urban children today, and very soon it will be when even the rural children may have access to that. The digital divide being becoming narrower, will have access to more technology. And then I have seen children in Malaysia, they will sit in the class and they will be looking at the things in the smartphone before the teacher tells something. And the teacher doesn't know what to do with that situation. You know, there was my earlier speaker said that the whole the pedagogy has to change. There is no way, otherwise there is no role for the teacher. It's not to say that teachers are not needed. So it is something like 24/7 we are learning. Many children get up and first thing to look at is the WhatsApp. I think then probably learn more from these technologies than what they learn in the classroom. I don't know how much we can mobilize these type of technologies into education, not in the formal sector alone, but across board for all the objectives. Like for example, one of the suggestions I will have for CEE is to have all the materials made open educational resources and put it in the repository. Let anybody use it, anywhere in the world. And let them change it. Now, the whole idea is not just using it. You localize it. You add, improve on that. You know, that's the only idea that I really wanted to put here. I mean, although there were some slides, but I know that this is probably more impactful in this group. I know that formal system has more or less not succeeded. I mean, I am from the formal system. As somebody told, education is very important, that we should not leave it to only educators. It has to be done by all of us. But that doesn't mean that we have to go only in the traditional way of doing it, which will not reach people. And with the developments in open education is as the computer people would call it as ubiquitous learning. It is learning every minute that we are learning, and that's probably can make a difference in the change in lifestyle, change in the mindset. If you look at some of the habits that we have developed over time from our family, it's because we are sort of hearing it and practicing it on a daily basis. If that sort of an impact can be provided to the learners on a regular basis through different games, etc., was talked about, and different good content. I know good content is being developed. Through all those content, if we are able to do on in a continuous lifelong manner, then I think that we are achieving lifelong learning. Otherwise, still it is on the books. Thank you so much. I think I will stop here.
So that people could have really dwelt on issues. Now it's becoming interesting, but unfortunately we are running against time. But anyway, let's come to our last speaker, Professor Anil Kumar Gupta, and he is going to speak on education, innovation and empathy.
Went to Nadipur. There is a Gram Vidyapeeth. At one time there were about 24 such institutions in Gujarat. Now there are about 10 to 12 left, which practice what Ilabhan referred to, which is Bunyadi Talim, and learning from experience. So one girl asked me a question. I said, please ask me a question of which I don't have the answer. So one girl was really smart. She said, okay, we have two things, a lump of sugar, a lump of jaggery. The jaggery attracts the big ant. The sugar attracts the small ant. Why? And I can tell you that question was on the edge of science, because she didn't know what chemicals are contained in both. She didn't know what kind of ability that different kinds of ants have to smell them or to trace their signatures of the chemicals. But this is the way I presume education could have been, should really be, where teachers reward students for asking questions that they don't have answers. In my class, only those students can get a grade in IMA who teach me something new, something that I didn't know. Otherwise, why should I give grades to somebody who has told me what I already knew? And I think pushing the children, pushing the younger generation, pushing all of us to ask questions for which we may not have easy answers is what the real purpose of education is. And I agree with all the other speakers who have reinforced this. But what kind of education? And how would it help in SDGs? The education that will remind us of 2 or 3 historic instances in our developmental history, which might be useful to other countries. Shri K. Munshi, who was a novelist, great writer, our Minister of Food and Agriculture, gave a series of lectures in 1952. And these lectures were titled, when they were put together, one of the lectures was, of course, this was the title, Gospel of Dirty Hand. The Gospel of Dirty Hand. And what did he say? What did he imply? He implied that, and he referred to his own family and his own, look at the paradoxical way of teaching. He said, look, only time my granddaughter soils her hand is with the ink of the fountain pen. Because there were servants at home. And they did everything else. He was worried. At that time, in India, there was a new word which had come in our polity called as extension. He said extension means enlargement. How prophetic. He had predicted how the extension system will take over, He said extension means enlargement. We need to think of Bhu Parivartan, land transformation. The first unit of land army, many of you may not know, was created in 1952. What did it do? It comprised the students of Delhi University, and they were asked to go to Chhatarpur, which is a village within Delhi boundary, to clean the drain, Chhatarpur drain. He realized that when water clogs, when drain clogs, the only people in front of whose house the water will spill over, the waste water will spill over are the poor people. So if you don't clean the drain, You are really telling poor people this is where you belong. That is education. That also is education. So he said, no, we don't want that. If we want to transform our society, if we want to move our society on a sustainability path, sustainability was not a popular word at that time. So these thinkers are ahead of the time by the time that word has caught up with these concepts. In 1938, there was a lecture given by John Griffith. These lectures are put together in a book called A Human Situation. And I was reflecting on that when I listened to Lavan and Mohan and others. There is an instance that the author describes. Angels from the heaven are looking at the children on the ground. And there's a girl that they like very much, who is playful, who is talkative, who is naughty. So they come and talk to her and say, look, little kid, God is very pleased with you. Now don't misinterpret the next sentence. God is very pleased with you. He wants to play with you. Will you come to the heaven? She thought for a minute and then said, I don't mind coming to the heaven provided I have devil to play with. That is playfulness. What's the point in playing with God? He follows all the rules. Everything will have to be done as per the rules. Children, you know, they change the rules as they play. What I'm trying to say is there's a playfulness. There's a playfulness which should characterize education, which actually does characterize education. You ask any good teacher, you ask any place where education is effective, playfulness is an essential part of that process, no matter at what level do we teach. How do we bring it back? How do we bring it back? How do we reinforce it where it is happening? How do we introduce it where it is not happening? Let me mention a few ways in which this can happen. There is a beautiful word in Sanskrit, Gujarati and many Indian languages with slight change in intonation, samvedana. Sam means equal, Vedana means pain. When I experience somebody else's pain as intensely as that person feels it, it doesn't remain that person's pain, it becomes my pain. When Sajanshilta, creativity, innovation are born out of samvedana, they become empathetic innovation. Innovation which solve problems of somebody who is suffering from the problem. So one little girl, Shalini in Bihar, Patna, looked at her father, her grandfather, who was using a walker. Now, my wife, Sadhana, also uses walker sometimes because she has a problem in balancing. But this idea did not occur to me. And I want to make it very clear that despite all the knowledge, all the expertise, all the proficiency, all the social and ethical capital that one may command, one can goof up. So what she saw, and she said, my grandfather can't use this walker on the staircase. The front legs should be adjustable. That's all she wrote on a piece of paper. My friends in Honeybee Network, Sashti, and National Innovation Foundation got it fabricated. It was licensed to a company, and she got few lakh rupees as license fee. She became one of the youngest entrepreneurs. Now, this education, which empowered her to share her idea about a pain that she was experiencing by looking at her grandfather, whose problem was not solved by the solution that was available. And mind you, this is a universal technology. Even in US and Europe, you don't have walkers which have adjustable legs. So she has not solved Indian problem. She has not solved the problem of Bihar. She has solved the problem of the world. This is the power the children have. And I'm very proud to say that one of the most optimistic things one can say about future is children are far less patient with the problem than my generation has been. You know, we were very expert in explaining why things don't work. How can you do this? There are policy constraints, there are bureaucracies. You know, we have abused the bureaucrats, unlimited life. For all problems, you can find problems with the inertia of the bureaucracy. But children, unfortunately, are not in the blame game. They want problems to be solved here and now. So let me conclude by giving few examples by which we could really engage our society and society all around the world to make SDGs a reality. 20 million people travel by train every day. 20 million people, at least 20 million people travel by train every day. And we don't converse with them at all. We don't tell them, for instance, that if you cut the vegetables after washing, you get more nutrition. But if you wash them after cutting, you get less nutrition. So for the same amount that you're spending on vegetable, 2 rupees, 3 rupees, whatever poor person can afford, you get less nutrition because free amino acids have been washed away, vitamins have been washed away if you wash after cutting. Simple message. If you cook food in an iron vessel, as we used to do earlier, or put a chomp, put a little bit of, whatever word that is, English word, I don't know, put little butter oil in the ghee, in the dal with a iron ladle, iron vessel, you get enough iron. All the midday meal scheme vessels are aluminium in Delhi. None use iron. 60% women of our country are suffering from anemia. That means not just the poor. Even the non-poor and well-off women also suffer from anemia. But we will not use iron vessel. We will not talk about iron vessel. In Cambodia, a student made a fish of cast iron with a little bit of zinc, a little bit of other minerals, and told people to put it in the curry when they cook food. They got iron. We had the practice of using iron kadai and other iron vessels. We stopped it. So the innovation is not just about how to bring new ideas. Innovation is also about how to continue ideas that work. We need innovations of both kinds. And innovation that can sustain our society and brings some Vedana, Sahesta, Saralta, Santosh, and Swaraj, and some kind of santulan between the different parts of our society. I would not say one word more except tell a small story of a girl, Chaya Thakur, from a village near Amrapur in Mehsana, Gandhinagar district. We had a contest for ideas in Gandhinagar district and Sabarkantha district. 1,000 schools, 5,000 ideas. One child saw that in a primary school, the drinking water tap is at constant height, straight, flat. Those children who are small can't reach the tap. They've all seen it. I had seen it. It never occurred to me that there's a problem with the design. She said, why can't you tilt the pipe? Small kid will drink, the taller will drink, the taller will also be able to drink, problem will get solved. I invited her as a visiting faculty to my institute because she had looked at the problem, she had analyzed it, she had assimilated it, she had abstracted it, and she got it applied in the community. She got that tap installed. So what I'm saying is there's a great deal that we can learn from children if only we pay attention to what they say, what they are talking about, and at all generations, young people have a lot to say. I'm sure we can transform the society and achieve the SDGs. Thank you so much.
Interventions on a positive note. I'm sure with this approach, we are going to achieve the SDGs, isn't it? We have some, maybe some 10 minutes, although we, okay, so 10 minutes for questions. Please ask questions to which he has no answer.
50 years and above, maybe they can people not focusing on that part of the society.
Correct. And who should answer?
Anyone.
Yes, I mentioned about continued education, and then so I say, and I mean it, and that has been my experience, that we have been able to learn more solidly from those who have the experience, from those who have the age, so they have the experience and wisdom both, and those who have actually done it. So it is more, most authentic. Added to that, I would also say that it is high time that we learn from villages. That is what they have done. They know the best recycling. They know the best how to live economically and still save. They know best how to, where to save. Not necessarily in a bank, but in many other things where they save their cash money. So hardly enough investment goes into that, because that wisdom and that experience has not been valued and has not been recognized. So I think not only, of course, not only adults and then the aged people, but also from villages, from different regions of our country. It has always have to be two-way. Otherwise, we all are losers.
just from the teacher's side now that the student has asked. I thought we had forgotten that there is some de-schooling on unlearning that is very important and that has not been brought up. If we want to work on the SDGs, I think the boys' question is that you have fooled around the world so much that why don't you start educating the adults as well? And I think that that has been inadequately brought up on the agenda. So we need some adult education for achieving the SDGs, and I think that is the message. And I think Anil just finished on that note that once you go to children, they help you in de-learning or de-schooling yourselves. Thank you.
Let's have this young man from here. Please.
So my question to you people is, at present, if we check India's population, around 65% is less than the age group of 29, and by 2020, it's supposed to be the average age of Indian population would be 29. And sir, when looking at the goals of achieving SDGs, when we have planned like 2030, by then the age would be 39. That is, the 65% population would be in the group of 39 age. Sir, so should the SDGs be again divided into something wherein we will have to set short-term goals as well as long-term goals? Short-term goals, say for the period till 2020, wherein we have the age group in the age of still 29, the 65% of population, and then again remodulate it, say for 20 to 30, wherein we can have this age group 29 to 39 be more active.
Is anybody responding? Otherwise, I may attempt. You want to say something? You want? Let's collect more questions. Okay, that's a good suggestion. Yes, this lady, and thereafter you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Questions and all three ladies, please. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was going through the speakers list, and it's all about education as a driver, and I was wondering, why don't we have somebody from the education department? Because the fact of the matter is, compulsions are going to be the requirement. In spite of all the talks, unless and until the compulsions don't go from the board, it could be BU permissions, it could be certain inspection norms, anything, where it will all be just talks. Thank you.
सर नमस्कार, मिसेस शुभा तिवारी और मैं प्रिंसिपल हूँ एक गवर्नमेंट स्कूल में और मेरा स्कूल एक रूरल एरिया में। यहाँ हम बात कर रहे हैं एजुकेशन एज ए ड्राइवर फॉर एसडीजी। तो मेरा जो एक्सपीरियंस है, जो गांव के लोग हैं जिनको हम कहते हैं निरक्षर, मेरे ख्याल से वो एबीसी भी नहीं जानते हैं, बट दे आर मोर इको फ्रेंडली। और एक जो पढ़ा लिखा कौम है, जो मेरे ख्याल से ज़्यादा आवश्यकता है उनके लिए एज ए ड्राइवर रोल, तो इसमें एक कमेंट चाहूँगी।
Good afternoon to all. My name is Amrita Dhuma. I'm coming from Development Management Institute, which is in Patna, Bihar. So I have a question on the similar lines. I've been working in Gaya, which is a Naxal-affected district in Bihar, for last 3.5 years. So when there was a lot of talk before 2015 about MDG, that is Millennium Development Goals, but when I talk about people in Gaya or per se Bihar, rather than the question in competitive examinations, Millennium Development Goals were never talked about the common man. So is it the same story for Sustainable Development Goals? Are we thinking about something on those lines, that how the penetration or participation should be there at the common man level? Because they already have certain eco-friendly practices, but they need to understand these sustainable development and goals. So that's what my question is. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Farida Wahidi, and I'm representing City Montessori School, Lucknow, which has about 52,000 students. One of the things that I wanted to mention here is that we have experienced that it's very rewarding. You get far greater results when you are working with the students in the age group of 11 to 15 or 12 to 15, which we call as junior youth. And that in order to work with them effectively, we have to work with the youth of the school because of the difference in the age group that makes it possible for these junior youth to respond much better. My question to you, Mr. Ananta Duryappa, is this, that you brought out so many fundamental issues that I think are very, very important in this whole field of education. Is it possible to come up with a conceptual framework that clearly defines the various elements that should be taken into consideration in order to provide that kind of an education that inspires and motivates people of all age groups to initiate and sustain this dual process of individual and societal transformation?
Okay, thank you. Let that be the last question because we are really short of time. So, yes, let him start and then we can have the question time. Yes, please. Dr. Anand.
Well, the question you asked is a very difficult one. You know, it's, as you say, very complex. It goes into both psychology. It requires inputs from neuroscientists because in the way how our brains work, which parts of the brains work, which parts address which particular type of information. I like conceptual frameworks. One of the things that I always critiqued the SDGs was that there was no conceptual framework. It was a basket of, I think, rightly, the items were rightly there, but what's the conceptual framework binding them? And that was one of the main problems with that. We at the Institute are primarily now putting together a working group to actually come up with this kind of conceptual framework which draws from the various disciplines. Not just the educators, but just from a variety of different disciplines that have valuable inputs into this. Plus practitioners and, really important, the youth, the younger people, because they actually, I think from my interaction so far, they have it better packed than most of us. In terms of what exactly they're looking for in an education system. I just want to finish off with actually two. One is with this is that the education system we have right now is a very predatory system. I'm a little bit maybe quite drastic in saying that, but it actually motivates behavior of a predatory nature because the way we assess, the first thing is, have I done better than the other chap, rather than have I done better than what I think I could have done. And that then translates into everything that we do in life. It's always a predatorial kind of a mentality. And then couple that with the great economic system that we have, you have a double whammy there. So these are real changes in mindsets. And with that, even with the gentleman over here who asked about the short-term time and long-term, it's the sustainable development goals. It's an oxymoron to have a 2030. It's sustainable, it's infinite. It has to be changing and evolve. So that's something that we also need to have a discussion.
Responding to the question here, as well as to the question which was possessed, one of the key difference between the MDG process and the SDG process is now that we have an organizational setup started by the United Nations itself, known as the HLPF, that is a high-level political forum, for which the member nations are accountable to report about their particular achievement with regard to the SDG. So this is one of the huge difference, that now member nations are really putting in that hard work with regard to advocacy, with regard to outreach, and making sure that the entire SDG process is localized. Also, with regard to the age group, SDGs are universal, and that's the reason why they have been split into 169 targets as well as indicators. So basically, you can't achieve SDGs entirely, but what you can do is you can achieve the targets, as well as it can be indicated through the indicators which are given. So, and when you said about from 29 to 39, yes, I do agree to that point. So exactly the reason why we need to ensure that the youth right now is given that particular boost, is given that particular platform, so that when they leave the youth stage, they are already responsible adults, they are already responsible active citizens who know what to do, how to do, and why to do. Thank you.
Mohan Menon, you want to say something?
No, I just want to take just half a minute or a minute to say that I do believe that giving the responsibility fully to the education system may not be a right move. While it is important that we should try to improve it. No. I'm generally responding. I mean, I'm not just responding to you, because there are other things also teachers have said. We have somehow not succeeded because of, as was very clearly said about that, there are other concerns in the schooling in terms of admission later, etc., etc. So what is important is that how can the outside the school non-formal ways of influencing people can be mobilized further. That's where really technology comes in. I mean, I didn't talk too much of technology because we all know about it. That's where we should really come in. Of course, schools also will be part of that. There may be a network where all will be participating in that network, and repositories will be there. Schools will be making use of those materials, but the feeding into that will come from all of you. I mean, it cannot be left to the school alone to do that. And when we talked about even elderly people experience, the tacit knowledge that it is can be collected. How much we have collected that? Even if we have collected, we have not made available. You know, I agree that there's a lot of knowledge available in the villages among elderly people, but we have really not collected and made available to that's where we have to mobilize in a very, maybe government should also come in terms of like what the higher education did with the NPTEL, for example. A lot of materials NPTEL putting in. Why can't there be a repository on environment related materials openly available for anybody to use, including the schools?
Friends, first let me answer the last point, that there are many repositories of open source content which is democratically available to people to use anywhere in the world. So honeybee.org or srishti.org provide more than 15,000 examples, and some of them about 8,000 in 4 languages, to anybody who wants to develop, find uses of how people try to survive and manage their livelihood in different parts of the country through their own genius. Completely democratic, open access, based on last 25 years of Honeybee Network, number 1. Number 2, there's a wonderful database my colleague Vijay Sharichand has developed with the help of Honeybee Network called as teachersastransformers.org. Teachersastransformers.org. Again, open access, 15,000 examples of the innovation that teachers have brought about in government schools, not private schools, government schools. With all the constraints that you're talking about of district education officer and whatever else, these teachers defied all constraints and succeeded in overcoming constraints. The children are malnourished, they asked children to bring a handful of grains, sprouted them in the school, fed them back, they sprouted grains, their malnutrition problem got solved. With the community involvement, with no help from the government, no help from any charitable organization. Teachers have done that. So kindly look at this database. Third, National Innovation Foundation has 200,000 plus ideas from 550 districts of creativity and traditional knowledge of the people. Not all of it is in public domain because intellectual property rights are involved with the people, but for those who want to learn from them, mechanisms can be found. Finally, techpedia.srishti.org, it has 187,000 open source engineering projects done by 500,000 students of our country, so that you can see what ideas are there in the mind of this youth. Can they be linked to the goals that Ministry of Environment has, Ministry of Food has, Ministry of Labor has? How can we engage 1 million students of our country who do a project in their final year with the unsolved, unmet needs of our society, and similar framework can be done in every part of the world. So there are large number of open source databases available. We are very proud that not used properly. I agree. None of them maybe have known. You didn't know. So that's a failure on our part that we did not reach you. That's perfectly fine. But I think this platform like this, which Karthikeya has provided us, is a very useful framework. The platform. The framework is that people should be able to democratically access knowledge that is available, and Indian society aspires to be the largest provider of open source content. As you can see, this is the pressure of thrust of our government, and we would very much like to join hands with anybody who wants to use it, translate in your language, make it available to the community. Thank you.
So with that, we end this session. Just 2-3 sentences. Go through this. This is a set of aspirational goals. Those of you who are not involved in international multilateral negotiations would not imagine the kind of process that is gone through before this is finalized. So this is just a small set of action. I think these aspirational goals, nobody can contest with. Nobody can say these are not required. But this is not a comprehensive set of actions. This is something which has been negotiated. Almost all countries have agreed to do this. Time frame can be an issue. Budget can be an issue. Indicators can be an issue. But to not do any one of these, no country has mentioned that. And I don't think none of you would mention it. This is something which is highly desirable. How to do is the question. Government has a role. Industry has a role. Larger society has a role. Women have a role. Youth have a role. Those who are past their youth have a role. So all of us have a role. Now, I think the challenge is, after sessions like this, each one of us feels motivated enough to do his or her bit to achieve these goals. I think this is what is needed. Thank you very much.
Over 30 minutes, so we request you all to have a very quick lunch and come back to your working sessions. But before that, we will be all going for a group photograph at the lawns. The CE colleagues will be leading you. You can take this route also, and you can go from the back also. And CE colleagues, please lead everyone for the group photo.